First of all, that's why we put the word Enlightened Warriors. It's not about violence. We're not talking about tribal warriors. It's kind of an epic hero. Of course, I'm not talking about the Viking gods here, but it's the epic hero. Who is this enlightened? Let me give you a little characteristic of them. They're really giants of mind, giants of heart. They have learned about life. They're the grand wizards of life. They know how to work with life. So because they have mastered how to, overcome challenges. But it starts with a self-discipline. They're the warrior of their own soul, the warrior of their own mind. They are the warrior of their own heart. And then they bring that discipline and philosophy to their relationship, to compassion, to kindness, to love, to forgiveness. They bring that achievement, that power, that intensity to prosperity, to developing their business and all that. And they also follow a codes, and ethics. And that's one of the things I would actually lecture at the U.S. Naval Academy, which allows them to live within a proper way of life so they don't become these violent lunatics that are just going to go around and just enforce themselves. I make sure in all of my talks and lectures and whatever I do, for example, I talk about samurais of Japan. I make it very clear, hey, listen, we're not talking about the drunken samurai that had too much sake and is going and killing everybody left and right. We're talking about the enlightened samurai, that there's many you can see in the literature, the names are there. And they're really following a deep philosophy of personal discipline and life.
Welcome to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. I'm your host, Johnny Mango. This is the place where we inquire about lifestyle, culture, and careers. Weekly, we meet with new guests that make a contribution of their insightful stories about their careers and how those careers impact their lifestyle and culture. Hello, everybody. This is Johnny Mango, and today I am really excited to have a guest on who's got such a varied background that, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know where to start with him. I'd like to introduce you to Cameron Logman. He's the founder of Rise of Giants, which is a bi-weekly podcast, but he's also an accomplished CEO with significant leadership experience. He's an MBA Professor of Business, and he's also the inventor of pepper spray. So in his professional capacity, he's been an advisor to some of the most recognized global brands, including Apple, so on various global projects. So I'd like to welcome Cameron Logman. Cameron, welcome to our show.
Good with you, Johnny.
So, Cameron, tell us a little bit about how'd you get to all these things? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, let me then, I think the best way to do that is just let me start with my professional life now very quickly and then go backward to my upbringing and why did I end up where I am right now.
Sure.
Because that really leads to the whole Rise of Giants concept. As you mentioned, professionally, I've been CEO for decades. I mean, one of the companies that I started was the company that I invented, of course, with a team of scientists. We invented pepper spray technology for law enforcement, and then we went global. I mean, every police department you see around the world, including, the guidelines, manual, certification of police for use, proper use, and all that was done by me. So we did that. And then I had other companies that I worked with. But also along the path of, the professional life of business, I had the academic side, which you just mentioned. I was a professor of MBA for years and years, and also professor of Eastern philosophy. That was kind of my interest on that side, so both of them. And one of my expertise in Eastern philosophy came toward the warrior tradition, and of not modern military, but earlier than that. So I've been a lecturer on U.S. Naval Academy and Annapolis for war colleges and discussing those things and strategies and the way they thought and different kind of subject and topics that relates to that. Because of my expertise, I was pulled to many major brands. One of them was Apple, that for more than a decade, I was advising senior executives about the various things. And actually, the sections of Rise of Giants that we will be discussing today was implemented at Apple exclusively. Going back to childhood, where did all this begin? Well, I was kind of a curious kid. And when I say kid, I was 11. And I was just asking, what is the meaning of all this? What is the purpose? And, I was just bothering my parents all the time. And as you can imagine, not everybody had all the answers. One day, this is something just interesting to share, has nothing to do with my future, but it's kind of interesting point in history. My grandmother's side, they were from Georgia, Russia. And I never were in Georgia, Russia or anything like that. And she had the opportunity to one time while she was in Russia to meet, of all people, Rasputin. And she starts talking, I didn't know Rasputin from anything. I mean, I don't know if it was a good man or a bad man or whatever. She started telling him how Rasputin had this power and all that. And as a kid, I'm just getting mesmerized by that. And I learned that he was hypnotizing people. I immediately start searching for somebody to teach me how to hypnotize, the Eastern method, which is kind of not very familiar in the West. And at the age of 14, I was hypnotizing everybody and everywhere I went. But, mind of a kid, I'm still searching. So I kind of got introduced to yoga at that early age and the yogic philosophy and very deeply, went into it, which for the next 50 years, now I'm studying high-level yogic philosophy, meditation, and on location in India. I'm with some of the best experts that, some of them you don't see on YouTube. I mean, they were the best of the best. So I am going there. Now, parallel to that, now let's talk about the warrior thing. Parallel to that is the Japanese martial art. So since the age of 11, I'm also interested in Japanese martial arts. So I'm really the classical martial art, not the type of thing you see for kids practicing today. The classical warrior thing. So I'm getting trained in that area. So that's developing my mind. Going back, something cute, I'm sure your audience will be interested to know. The development of pepper spray had many different reasons that I collaborated and guided and with FBI and give all the researchers to them, was actually not something that totally came to my mind by myself. I mean, the samurais of Japan were using something called Metsubishi, which was a kind of a little box that you put the powder of crushed pepper into it, and like a pipe, you would blow it to people's face when they were in closed enclosure. So that concept gave me an idea of how to get chili peppers and make it into a scientific program. And really, it was just like taking things from bark of the tree and make it into aspirin. I mean, we had to go to a chemical process to be able to develop some serious product that is safe, but at the same time, highly effective. So that's something we can go deeper if you're interested into it. But that's one of the reasons that pepper spray was developed. As I'm researching, as I'm looking for the meanings and how I want to see what's going on, I really was, Johnny, looking for a manual on life. Would that be nice if you were, you get up, you give your children, your friends, hey, listen, this is the way you live, by the way, And yes, I understand religions bring codes of values and this, that, the other, and all that. Every philosophies do that. There's so many options, but I mean, there's not one book that you can open up, and there is still not any one book that you can open up. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because every philosophy, every practice, every area that I went, and believe me, I just left no stone unturned. I mean, I traveled all around the world and looked into and really researched academically in place, interviewing people. I mean, I have hours and hours of videos and things like that unpublished. And as I'm doing that, although, for example, let's take yoga. Although yoga is very great for, health of the body and the mind and this, that, the other, it wasn't really addressing a lot of different things. For example, I was looking for a comprehensive approach to life, that manual. And why am I saying comprehensive? Well, mind and body, both of them are the fitness of our mind, fitness of our body. It's just very important. Another part of our life is our relationships. So if a relationship is not solid, it's going to damage every other area of life. Right. Prosperity is another thing I would like to bring up. I mean, they don't address these kind of things in many of these areas that I went and studied. Philosophy of life. When I say philosophy of life, I'm not talking about religion or God or anything like that, because those philosophies are already available. I was talking about your purpose, your meaning. Why are you getting out of bed in the morning? And that kind of thing that it's important to give to people from young age, and even if they're leaders.
Right.
As I'm doing this, I see everything is pointing back to a tradition. It's called the Enlightened Warrior tradition that is global around cultures. And it actually covers all this because they're very practical people, warriors. And they want to make sure that, when they're in battle, they're not thinking about the relationships. Things are just balanced. Things are working in some kind of a well-oiled gear, if you could mention it. Now, this comprehensive approach in mythology although I'm not going to be discussing mythology today. It's called the heroic journey. And the heroic journey is really a metaphor for life. Just think about a hero going on a journey. We're talking about a tale, struggles between good and evil. There's two battles. One is an external battle against outside forces and nature. The other one is an internal struggle within the mind of the warrior, of that hero. He's fighting with himself, the battle inside.
Right.
And eventually he has to overcome challenges. And he becomes the victor, and he becomes a catalyst for transforming of others, and he returns to his village. This is not light, because it has impacted a lot of people. I'll give you one big example. George Lucas, when he made the Star Wars, he credited his movies to heroic journey, which was at that time collaborated with Professor Joseph Campbell, eminent professor of mythology, talking about heroic journey in his books. So when I use the word warrior, let me just clarify something. It's a metaphor that are everywhere in every culture. And it's India documented it more extensively than anyone else. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, in China, you have it all over. You have Polynesia, you have everywhere you can imagine that tradition is there. But for whatever reason, India documented very well since ancient times. You see that part of all these things. And the reason I bring that India, because a lot of things people don't even think about, as much as you think yoga as what it is today, the original founder of yoga and meditation, which his name was Lord Shiva, was actually a warrior. And his son, Kartikeya, was the Lord of War. So most characters in global mythology across the world, in epics, including India, were all warriors. Why?
So let me ask you, Cameron, about the term warrior. Because, in our culture, warrior is kind of they're going to go shoot people. But can you expand on the term warrior? How would you describe it when you use the term warrior? How would you describe the life of the warrior or their behavior? Can you expand on that a little bit?
This is a fantastic question. Warriors, first of all, that's why we put the word enlightened warriors. It's not about violence. We're not talking about tribal warriors. It's kind of the epic hero. Of course, I'm not talking about the Viking gods here, but it's the epic hero. Who is this enlightened? Let me give you a little characteristic of them. They're really giants of mind, giants of heart. They have learned about life. They're the grand wizards of life. They know how to work with life. Because they have mastered how to, overcome challenges. But it starts with the self-discipline. They're the warrior of their own soul, the warrior of their own mind. They are the warrior of their own heart. And then they bring that discipline and philosophy to their relationship, to compassion, to kindness, to love, to forgiveness. They bring that achievement, that power, that intensity to prosperity, to developing their business and all that. And they also follow a codes, and ethics. And that's one of the things I would actually lecture at the U.S. Naval Academy, which allows them to live within a proper way of life so they don't become these violent lunatics that are just going to go around and just enforce themselves. I make sure in all of my talks and lectures and whatever I do, for example, I talk about samurais of Japan. I make it very clear, hey, listen, we're not talking about the drunken samurai that had too much sake and is going and killing everybody left and right. We're talking about the enlightened samurai, that there's many, you can see them in the literatures, the names are there. And they're really following a deep philosophy of personal discipline and life. Now, why the concept of warrior? Why the word warrior? Because life is intense. Life is powerful. And if we lay low, we will overcome in these mythological stories. So the heroic journey, which I'm going to get into it in a second, it is giving this warrior the power, the will, the focus, the clarity, and the wisdom to be able to go through life. All right? That doesn't mean you step on other people. It's all about your life. And you become a catalyst, an example, and a model for others. Perfect thing for actually leadership.
What comes to mind, a couple of weeks ago, I did an interview with a psychologist who specializes in what's called the imposter syndrome. And listening to you describe the warrior mentality ties into that imposter syndrome. In other words, the imposter syndrome has to do with someone who's capable but that doesn't feel they're capable. Okay, and what I'm hearing you say about the warrior mentality is that you have to have a strong external discipline and a very strong internal discipline that fit together.
Yes, but it is not the kind of things that people think of. Like you go on, like yogis, you go lay on the bed of nails. That's
Right.
But
No,
it has to work for everyone, for all ages. So it had to be a process that very naturally fits within your nature of a person. Right. So you're totally right. And if we will talk about that as we go forward here. One of the areas of the warrior actually thing is about the feeling of unworthiness and not being deserving. And that area to them is the dragon.
Yeah.
That has to be slayed.
Right.
So that's imposter syndrome is really there. I mean, imagine yourself as a leader and you get up from the wrong side of the bed, and the only way you can make sure that you lead people and you feel good about is yelling and shouting at them to bring them down so you feel better for yourself. That's not leadership.
Right. Right.
When you come from a point of view of strength, people just see it, feel it, almost like hearing music from you because they know you have it.
So the warrior really uses what I would call discernment in their everyday life. They really evaluate situations that tie in with whatever they're encountering.
The strategic approach to everything, it's actually one of the phenomena that was the gift of warriors to business and everything else. I mean, strategy comes from warriors.
Yes.
So they had to discern. They had to be strategic. They had to, how to. The word the strategy, actually, the concept of strategy is based on an old Sanskrit word from India from 6,000-7,000 years ago in a city called Mohenjo-daro, which is one of the oldest cities that right now is between, in Pakistan, but used to be India, of course, at that time. And it was near the river Sindh, which the India gets its name. Hindu, that's why they call him Hindu. They comes from that area. And in that, area, you will find out the word navigati, which means navigation. So the word of navigation comes from that area, from that city. And the concept was that life is like waves of ocean. You cannot control the waves of ocean, but like a great captain, with steady hand, focus, and wisdom, you can navigate the waves. That is the state of a warrior.
That's the discernment.
Exactly. So that's why they were phenomenal achievers. They were incredible strategists. They were exceptional creative thinkers. When I say creative thinking, this is really important. I mean, I actually thought a major team at Apple about innovation mindset and creative thinking based on the warrior thinking. Because they're fascinating, some of them humorous stories about how the warriors actually were creative in order to win, to achieve, to go where they need to go. And so the creative thinking is they look at the same reality you and I look at, but they look at it as from a different slice, from a different perspective. So they come up with a different idea from a different thing, which you can apply to innovation today.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about your podcast, Rise to Giants. Tell us a little bit about that, because I don't want to run out of time and not
Sure.
touch on that.
Decades of being a CEO, professor, this, that, the other, research and all that, I found that I'm in a unique position, that I've been not only researcher, but also I've been a practitioner, of this thing for 50 years. So I decided that I need to put it out there, and not for a business purpose. It's not what it was supposed to be. For that people can come in and learn about it and experience it, and there is some tool that is there even long after I'm gone. At least we have something here, so that nobody has to go build it from the beginning like I did for 50 years. So that's one of the reasons riseofgiants.com is there. It's about the Enlightened Warrior Philosophy and Discipline, which is available to everybody, and that's why I'm here to introduce it for the first time. The really main core of it, Johnny, is about reinventing and transforming how we live and work. Because you do that, then life becomes tremendously, well, not in a superficial way, like 5 steps to this or 6 steps to that, but really at the core, the transformation happens in that area. Because according to giants, we are free to fall or rise as giants. So because they're very practical, the voices of wisdom, transformation. And frankly, I can tell you that based on studies that I have done, both academically and research and practice and all of that for years, it's just one of the most powerful transformation of personal life, workplace, and really developing real leaders who will lead business and can lead the nations of future. And I think this is important, rather than just going through school of hard knocks and just pick it up by yourself, what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go. Let me bring you back to the heroic journey. How did they do this? How did the warrior do this? Instead of steps, kind of in a mythological way, they had what they called gates. Imagine like you're entering into a tunnel, a gate that they went into. And they had 17 gates that the warrior must go through during this heroic journey. Why? Because each of these gates were a comprehensive roadmap and offered practical life skills about all areas of our lives. So we had to go through. You couldn't ignore certain areas of our lives. I'm not talking about every little tidbit, but the major areas of life had to be, addressed. For example, these are not exactly all the description of the gates, but I'll just give you a few of them, so just kind of for the food for thought. First one starts with purpose and meaning. And, well, if you don't have a purpose and meaning, you don't want to get up in the morning from bed. That is the driving force of what takes you forward. So they really deep into that. What is your personal purpose? What is your personal meaning? Doesn't matter what age you are. I've seen people who are in their 80s and they just suddenly get up like a jackrabbit out of bed because they just have something that they're going after. Assumptions and beliefs is another thing. Question your assumptions and beliefs. Try to polish it better. Try to make it better. Don't get lost in it. Perception and nature of our consciousness. Do you see everything the way they're supposed to be? Are you pretty sure about the way you're thinking? So do you understand the nature of your perception? The next one is both physical and mental. The concept of agility, speed, and endurance. Again, mentally or physically. Then they address in another gate stress, anxiety, and fears. And they're not talking about, hey, listen, sit down for meditation, take 5 breaths so your anxiety goes away. They really go deep into it. I'll give you one little example here, just something to think about. Studies have been done at Oxford, and I've been involved actually with some of those people, about why is it, for example, the samurais, after 1600, not before that, they did not, after all the wars they were in, and they were ferocious, some of these wars, they did not have PTSD. What was the reason for that?
Wow.
Well, the reason was the code of warriors, for the philosophy of life, and they looked at things. It was not because they were brutal, and assassins. No. They had a philosophy of life. They had a code of conduct. And on top of that, Zen or meditation was really part of their thing. By the way, when I say Zen, and I said earlier that everything just kind of goes back to India, well, one area here that I want to mention to you, Zen actually was introduced by the Chinese into Japan, which was a mispronunciation of the Chinese word called Chan. And the Chan was introduced by an Indian monk called Bodhidharma into China, all right, years ago, 1,000 years ago, and it was a mispronunciation of the Sanskrit word called Dhyan. So you can see, and the Dhyan comes from the warrior tradition of India that came back and went all the way there. Now, the next thing they talk about in these gates is addiction and self-sabotage. How many great leaders have you seen that they go down because of these things? How many of us are we every day self-sabotaging ourselves?
Yes.
So extreme, you can't ignore that. Unworthiness and self-identity, we talked about that earlier. If you look at yourself in the mirror, you can walk around with a false ego and a mask as much as you want, but sooner or later you have to face yourself. So the sense of unworthiness and self-identity is not just about self-confidence, it's about that radiant identity that you have, that self-esteem that you have about yourself. I'm not talking about in an egotistical character. In fact, warriors are very humble. Why were they humble? Because they understood the power of life, that in any second they can get crushed. So that self-identity is important. Overcoming difficult challenges, you're talking about creative strategies and tactics, and how do you become master strategists? Remember, we talk about navigation. There's another gate. Luck and prosperity in work, job, and business. They were highly practical people. They talked about saving, even in those days, when they didn't have spreadsheet. They talked about, how do you have to invest in life. They talked about all of these things, but they also talked about the fact that you yourself have to get rid of the concept of misery, luck, I'm not unworthy, I'm unworthy, I don't deserve it. You have to get all of these things away. You have to have a crystal clear strategy. You have to have a crystal clear path. You have to have an acid-tested thing, where they call it battle-tested, not acid-tested. And then you take this forward to prosperity. I mean, you look at people who have been very successful that I have studied. And I've done a lot of it because leadership is I was in charge of executive education at American University. So I've done tons of leadership courses all over the place, including Naval Academy. So when you do this, you find that by studying of leadership of these successful people, there is a template for prosperity. Some of them don't even know they have it. Some of them by accident got there. But the ones that they have it, you can see that there is kind of following the generic pattern of the warriors. But the warriors really went deep into it. They really explained it.
What I'm hearing from you is the warrior practice a high level of what we call discipline, but also focus. Focus on those gates as you describe them and how they play into their life. And in our current modern world, we have so many distractions. Cell phones, for example, and other things, television, that I wonder if the distractions create a dysfunction in our world that is hard to maintain that warrior quality of mind.
Johnny, some of the greatest warriors could actually, sit on a horse and go with their whole tribe to another village while sleeping on the horse.
Really?
So the state of the mind, what could be busier and more distracting than war? The warriors learned how to shut the noise. The warrior philosophy is not teaching us to shun the world. In fact, it says, no, accept it. This is the garden you have to enjoy. Accept it. Of course, you're not going to go and enjoy thorn and poison and ivy, but you accept the garden. You don't shun it, but learn. Okay, learn how to navigate it and how to switch it off so your mind still there, but
Right.
It's so highly focused that you don't get disturbed by these things. And if it's going to take 50 years of practice, then it's worth nothing because nobody's going to do that. So I am going to give you, I'm not talking about me myself, the warrior path, the Enlightened Warrior Path. I'm going to give you a few techniques and few things, tools that have been battle tested so that you can go through life with your cell phone and with your life and discipline and problems that you have and challenges that you have, but maintain course on this river of life and make sure that but not only that, but you enjoying it. That's the most important part. The concept of joy is brought into the warrior tradition, which kind of sounds oxymoron. Is not. That they have it there that, hey, listen, if you're not doing it and you're not getting any joy out of it, what's the point? So they have that in there, yeah.
That's where the Rise to Giants comes in. It's the process of learning that and engaging in that.
Changing attitude, changing the philosophy, changing the way we basically get up in the morning. Listen, when you get up in the morning, there are few little things you have to do called morning rituals. Can do it right while you're sitting on the corner of your bed. That starts your day differently than just you let it go. According to warrior tradition, the heroic journey, you can either choose to take the heroic journey, which is a battle-tested thing going forward, or life will force you to go to the heroic journey. It's not a choice. And then you're going to go to the school of hard knocks. You're going to have injuries, you're going to have failures, you're going to have mistakes, you're going to have heartaches, you're going to have all of that. So they're saying, hey, listen, why are you doing all this? We've done it for you already. It is there. Follow a path called the heroic journey. Cross-culture has been there. What I'm doing, go ahead.
I would think in business, this is highly valuable. I mean, just in life, it's valuable, but someone who has let's say, a management responsibility or a leadership responsibility in business, this is highly valuable information.
No doubt about it. But think also, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm completely agreeing with you, but think about another aspect of it. What about that person right now that has lost his job or her job? And they need the strength. They need the strategy. They need the techniques. They need all of these things to rise as giants and go again, build their life to what needs to be done. Rather than just, picking up and talking to their friends and complaining and they don't know what to do.
Right, and drinking a bottle of wine and not getting out of bed.
Well, there's a place for everything. It's okay to drink a bottle of wine once in a blue moon. A bottle of wine is not going to cook your food.
Yeah, no, I understand that you're absolutely right. That's that philosophy can apply to a lot of different areas.
Yeah, that's why they said reinvention of life and work. That's what it is. And so I'm having this podcast right now, Johnny, that is for entertainment purpose. I'm just keep building it up, and it's it's free of charge. People can come and listen to it, do whatever they want to do. Everything is free on our website. So it's the philosophy of discipline of enlightened warriors, tales and stories and disciplines and physical, mental exercises. All these things are in there. Even prosperity we discuss, all of that.
Really?
Going forward, however, we're going to be developing many powerful and fascinating programs so people really can get into it, and start practicing it to do that. So for now, just all I want to do is just ask people, hey, listen, come to riseofgiant.com and just sign up, because at least we have a way to communicate with you. And of course, I'm always available by email, whoever has questions or wants to come and to talk to me. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, well, let's just take a few minutes and share with us your pepper spray journey.
Well, my pepper spray journey is kind of interesting. As I told you, it has two kind of approach. One of them is the warrior side, because I studied the military and all this technicalities and weaponries and this, that, the other of the ancient time that I brought into the picture. And the other side of it actually was, I was in an incident with my wife in Paris, France, and I've not shared that with anyone. And this is the first time, Johnny, I'm giving you an exclusive.
Okay.
So we were in Paris, and at that time, and that's decades ago, and a man followed us from the bank, and came with a knife, and went after my wife, and because she had money in her pocket that she took from the bank. And of course, my warrior kicked in, and I started fighting with him. Coming back to, United States, I started thinking about self-protection. Pepper spray existed then, but it was a dog repellent, and it was very, very weak product, and it was not really a professional product. When I say professional product, for example, you couldn't use it when it was freezing weather. It would freeze. You couldn't put it in a car during summer. It would explode because it was under pressure. It wasn't strong enough. It couldn't penetrate wind. So I brought a team of people together, started a company, the American Dream. We started a company, brought the people, just all of that together, started collaborating with the Department of Justice, law enforcement, FBI, this, that, the other, for several years. And then I bought all the toxicologists, chemists, everybody else. I mean, when I say to you, we had a facility in Indiana that was 2 million square feet of facility, and we could produce 600 canisters of pepper spray per minute.
Wow.
So we're not just some small operation sitting down the garage, packing things and putting into, UPS. Yeah. So we became highly technical in the point that this is a dependable technology. And when it comes from the pepper, I was just pioneering that. I mean, I was sitting down on the famous Wisconsin Avenue of Washington, D.C. area, right in front of the Naval Hospital when John F. Kennedy's body was brought in there. The other side is the National Institute of Library of Medicine. I spent hours and hours and hours and hours in that place, including Library of Congress, which eventually made me to take chili pepper and take the ingredients in there, which is called capsaicinoids, and which is something that when you eat, it causes you have inflammation, you heat in your system, you burn and all of that. And take that and cause it and bring it to a safe procedure and create a delivery system that we could safely put in a can, dependable, so every time we push the trigger, it's going to work. And it became a standard of law enforcement across the country. Of course, it took decades to do this. It was not overnight. And eventually, we traveled the world, and pepper spray went around the world. And now I'm just, for people to know, if you just check me out on on Google, you'll find out that I'm the leading expert on federal court for misuse of pepper spray by law enforcement and anybody else. So that is really the short story of a long trip that I took for the development of pepper spray.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
you've had quite a background. You've had quite a life, and I really appreciate you joining us today to share your stories and to especially to share with us the Enlightened Warrior concept, because I think a lot of times people hear that word warrior and all they're thinking about is somebody that's going to beat them up or shoot them or something like that, when in fact what you're really describing is a very finite discipline that engages all of life.
Yes, and it's the word warrior is there because in life failure is not an option.
Right. Wow. One last thing. Let's talk about, just take a few minutes to talk about your strategic approach to prosperity, because I saw that in your bio and I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, I mean, let me give a very quick review of that. It begins, first of all, with yourself. All right? I know everybody wants to jump to the money part, but it begins with yourself and your attitude. There are two components to it, the internal and the external. The internal is you. how do you see success? How do you see, financial? It's not about a number, all right? It's about how your attitude has to be positive about these things. You're building something. Imagine if you're building a beautiful home. You're building it from scratch. You have to have plan. You have to have strategy. You have to have the right vision, and you cannot be miserable. You have to send the right message to all the workers, to all the people around you, to people you work with. You have to be able to be a team leader, unifier, visionary. All of these things have to be built in you so that when you speak and talk, you're providing enough value to people, whether it's tangible, it's a doorknob you're selling, or whether you're selling a service. Doesn't matter. You are providing something that people can really appreciate. So it really begins with you changing, oh my God, I'm not deserving. Will I ever make it? I'm not lucky. All of that has to go out of the window. All right? Yeah. That has to be first worked on, built on in there. And it is not a 5-year process. It's a week process, a few weeks of process that the warriors have for you. Now, once you get over that, then they get very tactical and strategic. Just like going to war. Hey, listen, modern military, how many tanks do we need? How many airlines do we need? Airplane do we need? How many soldiers do we need? So they get into the tactical part of what is it I want? What is my objective? From A to B, how do I get this the fastest possible? They study it, and it's nothing different from majority of the strategic analysis people do, but in a different way. The mindset is different. The mindset is very creative. How do I get the faster? Because they have this concept of winning. They want to win. The victory concept is part of the warrior strategy, warrior life, to be victorious. So how do you put those elements of strategy and tactics and planning and all of that into it? And you look at your enemy, which today we call it competition, and you look at all of the psychology of the enemy. There is a book called Sun Tzu, The Art of War, by the Chinese general that goes back, and it has been studied with everybody, including General Eisenhower, either next to his bed. High-level people in intelligence study it as mandatory. But that's not the only book. There's so many, because this is my area of research. There's so many great books, some translated, some not, that are even better than that book, but that's the book that everybody knows about. That's why I'm bringing that up. So that's one of the part that you can take that 3,000 years old book and see some of those strategies actually applies to business. But the Warriors Edition is not relying just on that book. In India, for example, they have the Atharva Vedas and the Dhanur Vedas and all these other kind of books that they have. So you are focusing on the strategy and tactics of achieving what you have to achieve. And then they go back to it's a constant pendulum going from the outside winning of strategy, the money part, to the internal part, which is yourself, who you are. Why am I saying the internal part? Because I don't care what you do, you're going to fall on your knees. We have that in our Western culture here. The cowboys, you fall from the horse, you get back on the horse. Yeah. I'll give you one example in Japan, for example. Nana Karabi. That means 6 times down, 7 times up. And that means that you don't count how many times you went down. You count how many times you go up. So they're trying to, showing you how you don't go down on yourself. You don't beat yourself down. And you keep going, and you're going to fall down when you go and climb Mount Everest. And you're going to do this, but you're going to get to Mount Everest one way or the other. We're going to get you there. And this is the concept of warrior strategies and prosperity. Not the strategies are and tactics are. That's just, another session for another podcast of you and I.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
No, you made me think about entrepreneurs, and I've worked with a number of entrepreneurs over the years, and I've always been fascinated how they can crash and resurrect themselves. Start a business and it doesn't work, and then they start another one. I've always been fascinated by that, and that's kind of what you're talking about.
And it's so fascinating. John, you're so smart, and I'm not just giving you lip service. You're bringing that up right now so quickly. It's very interesting because the concept of entrepreneurship actually is something that we did at Apple a lot, because the warrior strategy talks about the beginner's mind. That means whenever you approach something, you always approach it with enthusiasm and open mind as a beginner. An entrepreneur has that. So we, at Apple, for example, one of the things they've done is that every department is almost like an entrepreneur department. You don't find a department that is 10,000 people. They're just short and sweet, and they're just all thinking creatively all the time.
Right.
Together. So they have this entrepreneur because they're always building, they're always creating. And this is, even if you're working in a bank that is not supposed to be like that, It is like that because when you and I look at yourself, let's look at our life. 30 years ago, the concept of bank is very different from the banks you have today. Some of them you feel like you're entering into a bar, the way they have designed it. There's just an entrance and lobby of a hotel, and, just the customer service concept has become over. Now many of them are online. Things are changing. The concept of, for example, when you're talking about entrepreneurship and creative thinking about it, the largest, owner of real estate and rooms in the world is not the Marriotts and Hilton anymore, that they have all these assets around the world. It's a company that doesn't even own a single room. It's called Airbnb.
Right.
So the mindset has changed. They look at it with an open mind, with a beginner mind, with an entrepreneurship mind. Doesn't matter what the industry is.
Yeah. Cameron, we are running out of time, but I want to thank you so much for what I would call this enlightened presentation. It was great. I learned so much from you today, and I hope my listeners do too. How does one find you? What's the best way to reach out to you, Cameron?
RiseOfGiants with an S.com, riseofgiants.com, and then I'm there by email and, whatever you can, and I answer all my emails.
Okay, very good. And again, thank you for joining us today. And maybe we'll have you on again sometime. It would be fun.
You can't stop me from talking here, John. So anytime, we're more than happy to join you. And, you were a great host, and I really appreciate that.
You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. Subscribe to hear a new and unique guest each week as they comment on their life's journey and share experiences with lifestyle, culture, and career. You can always find us at minuteswithmango.com.